Thank you for joining us for our presentation. I'm Dr. John Cron, and it's my pleasure to have you with me today. Most of us, most of the time, are about as happy as we want to be. Part of my life was taking people on tours all over the world. And on one tour to Israel, I had a lady who joined me whose name was Cram, K-R-A-H-M. My name is Cron, K-R-A-H-N. Now, Mrs. Cram really didn't want to be happy. She was finding problems with this hotel, with that. We stayed too long here, we were too short there for her liking, and she was complaining the whole time that we were together on the tour. And much to my chagrin, she also joined us going to Egypt. Now, my roommate for that tour was the bishop of my church. And when we got to our hotel in Egypt, it was right on the Nile River. And when the bishop and I got to our room, we noticed that there was one king-size bed. Now, oftentimes the spread is on two single beds, but they weren't single beds. It was one king-size bed. And so I called down to the front desk and I said, hey, look, we need another room with two single beds. And before you know it, the manager of the hotel comes running up, and what he says is, we don't have any more rooms. And I said, wow. So I turned to the bishop and I said, well, I guess we're kind of stuck here in this one bed. Well, the manager said, but I know I gave you the suite on the top floor. And I had been in the suite before, and it's lovely. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. You look out over the Nile River, you can see the pyramids of Giza in the background, and there's canapes, there's wine, there's all these kind of accoutrements that a suite has. Well, he had made a mistake. He thought he put us in the suite, but he had put Mrs. Cram and her roommate in the suite. He said, well, I will change it. I said, you can't change it. They're already in the suite. You can't throw them out. So I turned to the bishop and I said, Rudy, I said, I stay on my side of the bed. You think we can handle this? And he said, yeah, John, we can handle it. And so for that 2 nights, I was literally in bed with the bishop. Well, the next morning, Mrs. Cram comes to breakfast, and I can't wait to talk to her. I said, how was your room? She said, it was nice. She said, but there was no writing paper in the desk. So this sort of underlines my statement that most of the time we're about as happy as we choose to be. Now, if there's anyone watching this presentation that likes to be miserable, it's not something for you. But if at the time we have together, if there's some possibility that I can share with you some thoughts that would help you live a happier life, living a happier life at every age, then we will be successful today. Now, I'm not sharing with you everything on the subject. We don't have enough time, but hopefully the things that I share with you will be helpful to you. Let's begin. I will live today as if it were my last. What? I will live today as if it were my last. What was that? I will live today as if it were my last. Write it down. Post it on your refrigerator so that you can see it every day. What? I will live today as if it were my last. First, our life and our happiness is much of what we make it ourselves. Every day in our life is a precious gift. We have no claim on tomorrow. We only have, even those of us who live the longest, a limited number of days. And we need to squeeze the most that we can out of each and every one of them. We only have one opportunity to live today. Whether you're the President of the United States, whether you're the governor of New York, whether you are who you are, everyone has one shot to live today. So why not determine to live it well? When I lived in Levittown, and those of you who know the basic Levitt house know that there are 2 bedrooms on the first floor, and one is a very small one. And we decided that that would be the laundry room. And I had my desk in next to the dryer, okay? And for my 2 girls, we had a gerbil. Now this gerbil was in a fish tank about this big. And there was water, and there was food, and there was a wheel for the gerbil to exercise. And as I was studying or whatever, this gerbil would jump on this squeaky wheel, and the gerbil would run and run and run, and then would jump off and kind of look around, get back on the wheel, run and run and run and run, jump off and look around. And I often thought, what is that gerbil thinking? Is he thinking if I could just run a little bit faster, I'd get out of this stinking fish tank? Well, our lives are kind of like that sometimes. You know, we get on the wheel of every day and we run and we run and run, and we don't go anywhere. And one day is like the next day, it's like the next day, it's like the next day. I remember also a funeral that I attended. Now, all funerals are sad, but this was particularly sad. This woman had lost her husband. What had happened was, he worked for the police department, and right before his retirement, he worked all kinds of extra hours and time and overtime so that when his retirement was figured, it would be higher based upon his last couple of years of work. And he had a second job in which he was making money. And he and his wife were planning on how they were going to live in his retirement. They were going to travel, they were going to do this, they were going to do that, and they would really start living. And the tragedy was 4 months after he retired, he died. And she not only lost him, but all of her dreams sort of evaporated with his death. C.S. Lewis, the famous writer, said, "Where is the life we have lost in living?" Think about that. You know, one day, the next day, the next day, the next day, we look back 1 year, the next year, the next year, the next year. And instead of getting the most out of these years and days, sometimes we act as though they're unlimited, when in fact they are not. Now we have to dwell on that which is good in our lives. We have to focus on the things that bring us joy. There was a song by Johnny Mercer. Now you have to be my age or older to know who Johnny Mercer was. But maybe you'll remember the song. It goes like this. You have to accentuate the positive. Eliminate the negative. Latch on to the affirmative. And don't mess with Mr. In-Between. You've got to spread joy to the maximum. Bring gloom down to the minimum. So in our days, we have to look at that which is good. There's always, if you will, crap. Okay, there's always crap in our lives. I remember on one of my trips, I had mentioned earlier about Mrs. Cram and being to the Holy Land. One of the trips we went to Italy, and we were in northern Italy. And our hotel was on a beautiful lake, and in the background were mountains all around the lake, and they would reflect into the lake, and it was picture beautiful. And as was my practice, I got up early in the morning to go down to the breakfast area so that I can make sure everything would be in proper order for my group before they came to breakfast. And as I walked in, there was a very nice waitress, and she offered me a cup of coffee, and I thanked her, and everything was set out perfectly. So I went over, and they had from ceiling to floor picture windows all around this dining room. It was magnificent, absolutely magnificent. And I sat there drinking my coffee, soaking in this magnificent vista. And then I saw it. Some bird had flown over and relieved itself. And there, over to the right, near the bottom of the windows, was, you guessed it, the deposit from the bird crap. And I have to tell you honestly that I couldn't help myself. I kept looking over there at the bird crab. 95% was magnificent, but my eyes kept going to the what? The bird crab. So there's always going to be crap, you know, and are we going to focus on that? Or are we going to accentuate the positive and try to eliminate the negative? Now, I once went past a secretary's desk, and she had a 3x5 card attached to the screen of her computer, and it read this: if something is not fatal, it is really no big deal. If something is not fatal, it is really no big deal. Now, I'm sure most of you have flown. From 30,000 feet, looking down on a beautiful day, you can see these little communities as you're flying wherever. And there are several hundred homes, and maybe surrounding them are farmland or forests, but you see these little communities. And I've often wondered, from that perspective, someone in that community who baked their cake too long and burnt the bottom, is that really a big deal? Someone in that community who just got a little puppy, who didn't mess on the hardwood floor but on the rug, you know, it's irritating, but is that really a big deal? Is that fatal? It's not. Or even those of you who live in the New York area, when you get off the Throgs Neck Bridge and you're trying to get onto the LIE, and you're in line waiting to turn, and then there are those people that go up the side of the road and all the way in the front and squeeze in. Irritating. But is that really a big deal? No, it's not. How many of us worry about the future? You know, when our electricity might go out in a nor'easter. When we're worried about the future, we rob ourselves of the present. Mark Twain, near the end of his life, said, "As I look back, 90% of what I worried about never came to pass." And that's probably similar to all of us. 90% of what we really worried about never came to pass. But in worrying about it, it robbed us of the joy of the present. It robbed us. Now, you can't change the past, but you can ruin the present by worrying about the future. We have no control over most of what happens in the future. Eleanor Roosevelt was purported to have said, "Yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, and today is a gift. That's why we call it the present." Live in the present. Every day on earth is a gift. There's no endless supply of these days for any of us. Now, we also need to let go of negative evaluations of ourselves. We spoke about Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the most significant people in modern times. A fantastic life, fantastic communication, particularly after her husband passed away. When she was young, her parents said that she was unattractive, that she was ugly. They called her little grandma, even when she was 3 and 4 years old. And although she wasn't any kind of stunning beauty, she was a significant person in her life. She didn't let that negative opinion affect her in a negative way about herself. It's very, very important that we take those earlier thoughts about ourselves and we get over them. Let me tell you something about my own life. When I was in high school and prep school, and when I went through college, any paper that I had ever written, I never got more than a B. I got a C. I got a B. I got a C. I got a B. And my thoughts were, I have no gift in writing. This isn't my thing. Because it wasn't just one professor, but it was significant. Many read what I wrote and said, it's a C, okay, we'll give him a B. Maybe that'll encourage him. Then when I was in graduate school, I was taking a class on education. And in this class, although it was a master level class for me, there were all these doctoral students. They were Jesuits who were the smartest of the smart of the Roman Catholic Church, who were doing their doctoral work, and the subject was moral education. Well, the grade was based upon two things. One, our participation in the class discussion, and two, a paper that we wrote at the end of the class. Well, I decided early on that it was smarter for me not to say anything, and thought to be ignorant than to open my mouth and remove all doubt. I was happy that I could understand the conversation among my classmates, much less add anything to it. So it came time to write the paper, and since I had a background in psychology, I knew that there were two theorists, one Jean Piaget and the other Lawrence Kohlberg, who had a different opinion on how young children came to moral decisions. And so I constructed my own experiment with young children, and to see which I thought, was it more like Kohlberg from Harvard, or was it more like the classical guy Piaget? And so I wrote this paper up, my findings, and it was all of 5 pages. When it came time to hand in the papers, the professor said, pass them up to the front. And I happened to be in the front. And my Jesuit classmates, they were writing 50 pages, 75 pages. Some looked like theses, okay? And I almost got a hernia passing them up front. And I had like 5 pages to the professor's desk. Well, I thought, this doesn't look too good for me. About 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from this professor's secretary. Now, he was not only the professor, he was the head of the whole department in the school. He wanted to see me. I thought, this ain't any good. So I went in and I sat there, and he said, Mr. Cron, he said, I really liked your paper. So I said to my face, don't show too much pleasure, just kind of sit there. I said, thank you. He says, so much so that I have submitted it to a friend of mine, and this was the editor of a major educational periodical that went out through the entire nation, and he wants to publish it. May I have your permission? I said, oh, well, yeah, sure, that's great. Thank you, Professor, for doing that for me. That's wonderful. And it was published. Now, I didn't get an A in the course. Remember, it was based upon your participation, and your paper got an A-. You had to get, because I didn't open my mouth the whole time in the class. But it got me to thinking, maybe this is a talent that has bloomed later on in my life. So at that point, I went on a writing tear, and I tell you, I could paper my office and rejection slips. But also, during that period, I was published over 100 times. And since that time, I have published a dozen books. Now, I'm not trying to pin a medal on myself. What I'm trying to say is that some gift or some talent that is in you might only be blossoming later in your life. Look at Grandma Moses. It wasn't until she was about 78 years before her ability to paint was so great that she was recognized, okay? She was recognized, and she became famous. Now, my 10th grade teacher, my geometry teacher, knew inherently that we weren't going to remember a lot of geometry, okay? So at the end of every class, he would say this to us as we were leaving. He said, men, because it was an all-male school, men, make it a better day for someone else. The next class, men, make it a better day for someone else. For 6 months that we had that class, a half a semester or whatever length of time, at the end of every class, he said, make it a better day for someone else. Secondly, I want to say to you today, we can find much joy and happiness by doing something good for others. Some of the happiest people are not self-centered. They live their lives for others. I'm part of a soup kitchen, and we feed over 100 people a day, and a lot of the people that work on the different days are people my age and older than I am. And they find joy helping other people and making it a better day for someone else. A reporter once was observing a Roman Catholic sister who was washing and dressing the putrid wounds of a man in India. And upon watching her do this disgusting thing, he said to her, "I wouldn't do this for $1 million. The sister looked up for a moment and replied to the reporter, "Neither would I." She did it out of love for her God and for her fellow man. I once went past a church, and on its outdoor bulletin board, or pulpit as they sometimes call it, were these words: "Kindness is never wasted." There is more joy in being kind than being right, both for you and especially for the recipient of your kindness. For you to be right, you often need to show someone that what? That they are wrong. Let something unimportant just go. No one likes to be shown that they are wrong. Give that person an undeserved pass. This is the kind thing to do. Thirdly, if you want to be happy, you need to accept people as they are. You are happier when you accept people for who they are and how they are. Compassion is accepting people as they are. We cannot change others. We can only change ourselves. Now, my dear wife one day was suggesting ways that I could be a better person. And I said to her, "Doris, do I bring as much constructive criticism to your life as you bring to mine?" And she thought for a moment. She said, "No, you don't," she said, "but you need it more." Well, anyway, on a recent trip to Barnes & Noble, I spotted a book simply titled, ready for this, "Assholes." Now, we all know several, don't we? We need to let these people be what they are. We're not going to change them. If they were subject to change, they would lose this special designation and would not have had a book written just about them. We need not let them bother us. Be compassionate, not judgmental. We can choose whether we will let someone bother us or not. So we need to choose as our daily intention a happier, more loving and accepting embrace of ourselves and those around us. We need to stop judging people and events around us. What we can't change, we simply need to accept so that it doesn't bother us and eat at us and diminish our own personal happiness and our present, that it's a gift to each and every one of us. The same way that a carpenter is encouraged to measure twice and cut once, we need to think twice before we speak. None of us looks good having developed a foot-shaped mouth. Fourth, we need to choose to be happy. Simply put, happiness is a choice. And if you don't remember anything else that I say in this presentation, remember this: happiness is a choice. In the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers included what? The pursuit of happiness is one of the inalienable rights of all of us. Happiness is a blessing that comes multi to those who beckon her. It is something we need oftentimes to pursue. We need to make happiness a priority in our lives. It is both a choice as well as an intention. We intend that this day is going to be a day of happiness. Now, the cosmetic industry is huge. We spend so much money on things to help us improve our appearance. I want to share with you a better way that costs nothing. A smile is an inexpensive way to improve your looks. Let your face smile often. It costs nothing. You look your best when you're smiling, and you brighten the day of others who are looking at you. Now, when you're down in the dumps, a good way to get out is simply to put a smile on your face. Psychologists tell us that your mood often follows your actions. You may have a good reason for being down in the dumps, but if you cause yourself to smile, oftentimes your mood and your feelings follow this action. Now, what was Abraham Lincoln's famous quote? He says, most people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. Our friend Mrs. Cram, who I told you about, there's no writing paper in the desk, had her mind made up not to be happy. It's unfortunate she spent money for this trip. And to go around, there's always something negative in everything. Even when there's 95% positive, the window where the bird, destroyed the looks of the scenery, it was a negative, but there was 95% what? Positive. We fashion our lives and our happiness often by how we choose to play the hand we are dealt. Look at the life of the famous physicist Stephen Hawking, who recently passed away. Early in his life, he had ALS, and he lived with that disease, and he did some of his best works while having that disease. Really. He made the most of the hand he was dealt. Now, I want to ask you, when you wake up in the morning, do you say, "Good morning, God"? Or do you wake up by saying, "Good God, morning"? Each new day is an opportunity to make it our own. Enjoy the present moment and the miracle of now. Think, what good things are going to embrace my day? It's the first thing out of your mind. What good things are going to embrace my day? I remember once when I was going to an allergist, I was sitting in the office waiting for my turn, and this old codger comes walking in, and he looks at the people in the office. He says, "Surprised again, I woke up." So any day that we wake up is a day of possibilities for us. The great Helen Keller tells the story of a friend who said that she had walked in the woods recently, and Helen asked her, "Well, what did you see?" And the friend said, "Well, a bunch of trees, not much of anything." And that was incredulous for Helen Keller, who could see, who could hear. And she said, "When I walk in the woods, there are hundreds of things." She says, "I feel the bark on the trees, and some is very rough, and some is very smooth. I put my hand on a branch, and if I'm lucky, I can feel the quiver of a bird who is singing. I can go by a brook and put my hand in the water and feel the rush of the water. I can't, sometimes I feel that seeing people don't really see that much, really. And sometimes our life is like that. We just go along and we're like that gerbil. It's just like one, day is like the next. Now, really, one time or another, we all screw up and we feel badly for the moment and we make amends. We learn from our mistake, and then we have to let it go. Let it go. You can't, unscramble an egg. Once it's scrambled, it's scrambled. When it's done, it's done. It's bad enough that it happened once. We don't keep reliving it when there's nothing else that we can do to change it. Now, when we begin an uncertain adventure, we need to ask ourselves, what if it succeeds? What will be the joyful outcomes of our success? If you ponder the question, what if it fails? You may never savor the sweet taste of success. Let go of your limiting thoughts. Even when life is unfair to us, when we receive more than our share of the negative, we can decide not to push any unhappiness and misery buttons. I don't know whether you saw the classic movie Zorba with Anthony Quinn. If you did, you will remember the final scene when this scheme that Zorba had put together came crashing down at his feet, and he had complete financial ruin. And the camera comes to his face, and at that very moment you can see the anguish of his failure. But it didn't take long before he started to smile again. And it ended with him dancing because there was more to his life than this particular tragedy. Life is rarely, if ever, free of problems and issues. There's always something to keep us unhappy if we choose to dwell on it and embrace it. You know, even more money is not the source of happiness. You may like to play the lottery. I choose not to play the lottery. Why don't I play the lottery? I'll tell you simply, is for this reason. I don't want to win. I'm probably the only person that doesn't play the lottery because he doesn't want to win. Why do I not want to win the big prize of $50 million after taxes? Why? Because studies have shown that the people who make and win the big bucks, more than half of them say that they're less happy after winning than they were before they won. I don't like those odds. Why should I play something that if I win, chances are I will be less happy than if I lose? So I want to say to you, money is not the thing that's going to make you happy. Our former great president, Ronald Reagan, told the story of two boys of the same age. One of the boys was put in a room full of brand new toys. The other boy was put in a barn that only had a big pile of horse manure. Well, a little while later, the person who put them in the rooms came back, and the first boy in the room of the toys was just sitting quietly, afraid that if he played with the toys, he might break one of them. The second boy was found shoveling the manure feverishly while saying to himself, there must be a pony in here somewhere. We need to develop a positive mental attitude in life, a PMA, a positive mental attitude. Even when your life might be manure all around, we keep digging for the pony. Fifth, to be happy, we cannot allow fear to rob us of being everything we intended to be. Now, in the Bible, we read that we should not fear or worry more than 365 times, one for each day of the year. Don't let fear rule your life and steal your happiness. Too often we think, but what if I try and fail? The great inventor Thomas Edison tried and failed over 100 times before he was successful with the light bulb. Edison said, one of our greatest weaknesses lies in giving in. The most certain way to succeed is just to try one more time. One more time. Ulysses S. Grant, won the war for the North, not because he was a better general than Robert E. Lee. Rather, he simply did not let defeat stop him. in his pursuit of victory. George Washington lost mostly every battle he fought with the British. Mostly every one. If you read the history of the Revolutionary War, Washington was beaten almost every time. But he finally won the Revolutionary War because he would not accept defeat. He kept trying just one more time. We should look at every opportunity in our lives and ask the question, how will my life be happier if I succeed? Don't let fear rob you of your chance for success. Albert Einstein said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. We are often at our best when the challenge is at our greatest. Once again, in the middle of difficulty, the tough times, lies opportunity for something great. We are often at our best when the challenge is the greatest. The secret of success is getting up every time we're knocked down. When someone knocks you down, don't give up, but what? Get up. Get up. Now, if you think you can't do something, or you think you can, you're usually right either way. Either way. Now, there's a Chinese proverb which states, starting is half finished. What have you been dreaming about or doing for some time? Today is the first day in the rest of your life. What is the slogan for Nike tennis shoes? What? Just do it. Begin. And each acorn, there's the possibility of a mighty oak tree. And each person is the possibility of great things. If you can believe that an acorn can become a mighty oak tree, a small little acorn can become a mighty oak tree, why not believe that it's possible for you to do something wonderful? Number 6. Happy people seek to be everything they possibly can be in life. They live their lives to their last breath. Another Chinese proverb states, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with what? The first step. We may not be able to see the end of our journey as we begin it, but we will never have the joy of the journey and perhaps even the reward at its end without taking that first step, followed by the second and the third. So I want to ask you a question. A year from now, what will you wish you would have done? I want you to ask a question to those of us. I want to ask a question to those of us who are older. It is this. Why shouldn't the last act of our lives be the very best? Who says that the last act can't be the very best? When asked which of his works he would select as his masterpiece, architect Frank Lloyd Wright didn't say Running Waters or any of the others. At the age of 83, he replied, my next one. Instead of just being a human being, we need to constantly be a human doing. We need to be constantly and actively living a happy and a fulfilling life. Now, I once heard that the definition for old is someone 10 years older than you. With this definition, never allow the concept of old to hold you back. Never say, I'm too old to start something new. No one says you have to complete the project. Yeah, it's nice if you do. But take the journey. Have the joy of the challenge. Have the happiness of the pursuit. I mentioned about Grandma Moses, who at the age of 78 years old became famous. Colonel Sanders opened his first KFC franchise at the age of 62. He chose not to take early retirement. Now, when we look back on our lives, we do not regret so much the things that we did as much as the things that we did not do. Dying people rarely regret what they've done on a deathbed, but they regret what they didn't try, the dreams they didn't pursue, the chances they didn't take, the times they said, well, what if I fail? Rather than saying, what if I succeed? The story is told of two elderly ladies who were out shopping and they came across a piano store. One said to the other, I've always wanted to play the piano. But do you know how old I'll be when I learn to play it? Her wise friend answered her, well, you'll be the same age if you do not learn how to play. One of our greatest presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, who was sickly as a child, grew up advocating that everyone should pursue a strenuous and a productive life. President Roosevelt wrote, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. Who, in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end of the triumph of great, high achievement, who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. In closing, I want to share with you an article that was published a number of years ago when HIV and AIDS was in full bloom. It was published in the New York Times, and I think it kind of summates much of what I've been saying in this presentation. The article is called Uneasy Rider. There was a fellow by the name of Mike DeStefano, who was a rising young comedian who was a finalist in the NBC show Last Comic Standing, who unfortunately died of a heart attack at age 44. He grew up in a tough neighborhood in the Bronx. He had been addicted to heroin. 3 months before his death, he spoke with a fellow comedian friend by the name of Mark. This was their conversation that was included in the New York Times article called Uneasy Rider. DeStefano is speaking. When I was 21, I found out I'm HIV positive. Okay, I was diagnosed with HIV. That was 22 years ago, 23 years ago. And that's what changed my freaking life. I met this beautiful girl named Fran. And she had been recovering as an addict as well. And she was also HIV positive. We moved to Florida. His friend Mark asked, well, why? DeStefano says, because we were dying, and that's what people do. They move to Florida. I was 22. She was a little older than me, about 28 or 29. And we literally came to Florida like two old people would do. Mark, that's what, we did. That's what my life was like at that time. I don't know how long I would live. I was told by the doctors back then, perhaps, got the virus and people were dying in 4 or 5 years. I expected that to happen to me. she literally started getting sick. I think it was a 5-year period of slow deterioration, and then it was rapid. Like she got pneumonia 15 times. And she was in the hospital, and she was giving her last rites a few times and survived it. And it was just a brutal time in our lives. Mark says, I remember you shared a story once about taking a motorcycle ride. DeStefano says, yeah. During her last days, she was in this hospice place, and I had just gotten a Harley, my first Harley. Mark says, I saw you driving up on one. DeStefano says, yeah, I rode up on one day, and I love this motorcycle. And you know, she wanted to. Well, she came out and she saw it. And she got upset, you know, like she got angry at me. And she went back inside, all ticked off that I had the motorcycle. So I say to this guy that worked there, I forget his name. Let's call him Bill. Why is she so mad at me? He goes, well, she just feels like you're moving on with your life. And maybe you don't love her anymore. Like you have this motorcycle and you don't need her anymore. And I realized then how much I did need her. Like I loved her. She was my best friend. And so what I did was I went home and I brought some of my work shirts back to the hospice. And I brought them into her room and I said, Franny, my shirts are a freaking mess. And I need you to iron them for me. She got all, screw you, I'm in the hospice. So I left. I came back sometime later. All the shirts are ironed. You know, she got up. And then she's like, where's the motorcycle? Now she was excited about it. And that guy was right. She just wanted to know that I still needed her. Like I loved her, you know what I mean? Dying people, they feel that I'm alive. Then they pass away at one moment. But until that moment, they are alive. And they want to be loved. They want to be needed. They want to give and to share, you know. So now, she wants to see the Harley. So I take her out, and she wants to sit on it. And I put her on it. Then she wants me to start it up. Now she's wearing a paper dress. She's got her freaking morphine pole next to her. And she's sitting on this Harley. And I'm worried about, I'm worried about this thing. I'm worried about, that she would burn her freaking leg off. And so she says, pleading to me, can we just take a little ride around the parking lot? And I'm like, I can't. I'm thinking, get the hell off. Mark says, she's holding the drip IV pole. Stefano says, yeah. And then, it just hit me. I'm like, no, you have to do this. You're in the moment. You have to do this motorcycle ride, and it's dangerous. And what if she falls? And what if one day I'm telling the story, yeah, my wife, she almost died of AIDS, but then I killed her on my Harley. She just fell off and she broke her freaking head. Now, that's a messed up story. And then when I realized, screw it. Of course, yeah. So I'm riding around the hospice parking lot. And then my friend, who is a cripple in a wheelchair, comes barreling over in his van, laughing. What are you doing? I said, I'm riding Franny around. Franny's like, can we just go out in the street a little bit? Mark says, where's the morphine drip pole? She's holding it. DeStefano says, she's holding the pole, Mark. It was a pole with 4 wheels on the bottom, and we're riding around this hospice, and you could hear the damn wheels janging and banging. It was insane. And then I passed the front door, and all the nurses were standing out there in front, and they were all crying. They were watching us, and they were crying. And I didn't know why they were crying. I was like, why are they crying? I didn't get what they were seeing. I didn't know, because I was just into it. I was living it. I knew my wife who had suffered. She was a prostitute. She was a freaking heroin addict. She was beaten by pimps. This was her past. And then she ends up with AIDS. And she's dying. And all she wants is a damn ride on my motorcycle. So the next thing you know, we're on I-95. Because women, there's never enough for them. When on I-95, she unhooks the pole and she's riding, holding the morphine bag over her head with her gown that is flying up in the air so you could see her entire naked, bony body, when the morphine bag whipping in the wind. And we're passing by these guys in Lamborghinis, and I'm looking at them. What kind of life are you living? Look at me. I'm on top of the world here. And that was the last thing I did with her. And I feel so blessed and lucky. You know what I mean? You can't ask for a better moment and memory than that. And at some point in there, Mark, it clicked in me like I never thought of leaving her. I never even considered it, And today, it was the greatest decision I've made. It was the greatest thing I've ever done, was to care for my wife. I'll never do anything that great. Whether it's a freaking HBO special, whatever you want to give to me, nothing will be better than that, because it was such a deep reckoning within myself that I'm not a piece of dirt, that I don't deserve to stick needles in my arm. I'm a good person. Look what I'm capable of. I'm capable of deep love and commitment, That was my whole life, taking care of my Frankie. In closing, may I remind you of where we began. And that was with this statement: live each day as if it were your last. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the presentation, which I hope you did, I want to say that in my book, Living a Happier Life at Every Age, there's much, much more on that subject matter. This book is available through Amazon. What you simply need to do in the search section is just write my name, John H. Cron, in the search area. And this book, as well as others that I have written, will come up. Once again, thank you for listening. And live each day as if it were your last.